Well, good evening on a rainy Tuesday evening. Thanks for coming out. We're very excited to be hosting this event tonight. This will be our fifth movie here at the Whaling Museum, and we're very grateful for the opportunity to be using this wonderful auditorium that they've spent an incredible effort in making this really a world-class museum, and this is really, I think, a wonderful place to be holding a movie screening and an event. You know, the New Bedford Wellness Initiative is now working towards really its second anniversary, which will be the beginning of April. We're on a damp April Saturday, we started this whole initiative by walking around Buttonwood Park. And we've come quite a distance in that time. We've been able to partner with a lot of important leaders throughout the community that are really interested in making sure that this is a healthy community and that we continue to improve each day. And I'm just very fortunate to have a wonderful group of friends. I'm not going to be able to mention all of them. There's just too many people to mention. But there are so many people that really want to see us as a healthier community. And you know, when we started this, one of the things that motivated me was to say, you know, New Bedford was recognized as being one of the least healthy areas in the state of Massachusetts, and I think that we're on track to improve that at this point. And coming out to these events, you know, when we really think about it, each person here can affect all those people around you, and hopefully tonight you will learn some things, and we'll have a discussion afterwards with Dr. Ludwig. And this movie really is a very important movie for all of us to really learn what should we be eating. You know, when we sit there and go, what should we be eating? There's so many mixed messages. You know, are we supposed to eat vegan? Are we going to eat paleo? Is it Mediterranean? Is it no sugar, no salt? You know, we only eat carrots today. So, you know, so at the end of the day, we have all these mixed messages, and I think that what Michael Pollan's done in this movie has made it very simple for us to eat healthy. There was just a study within the last week or so that said that about 60% of our foods are ultra-processed, meaning super processed. And that means that a lot of those foods have additives and sugar, which we're learning more about the dangers of added sugar. So today marks our fifth movie. We've continued to have we have now a weekly wellness program at the Greater New Bedford Boys and Girls Club for adults every Sunday from 11 to 3. Our Facebook group is now up to just about 2,700 people. And at this point, people have probably almost seen enough posts for me that they're like, when will you get other people to start posting? But we're continuing that discussion online, at the Boys Club, at the walks, at these events. And, you know, I was just at an event the other day, and Mayor John Mitchell and I were at an event the other day, and he got up to say something, and, you know, he said, you know, I got in the buffet line, and I was standing there, and he had to make sure that he ate healthy. I said, well, that's a good thing, I guess. But this movie, In Defense of Food, by Michael Pollan, who's a food journalist and works out at University of California, San Francisco, is a very important film. And he's part really of a group of journalists, physicians, researchers that are helping us to improve our diet, which really has gotten off track in the last 40 years, really ever since our dietary guidelines in the late 70s. We've kind of gone down this path of low fat, higher carbs, and that experiment hasn't really gone so well for us. And the message really comes down to eating real food. And that's where we really need to get to. His mantra in this film is eat food, not too much, mostly plants. And I actually use this with patients, and I change it to one extra thing. So those of you that know me, I like to use mindfulness. So I add the last part when I work with patients is not too fast. You know, we're all going in a rush. I'm not sure where we're all going all the time. And if we just slowed things, I've had patients tell me just by slowing things down, they've been able to lose weight and actually taste food and realize what it is to experience food again. So We have the 75-minute version. If you want more from this film, there's plenty of extra footage online on PBS. The documentary itself is 2 hours. We're going to be doing 75 minutes. And at the conclusion of this, Dr. David Ludwig, so please stick around for this because we're very excited to have him down here. He's in this film, but he's also going to be talking about his new book, Always Hungry. And we're going to have that discussion tonight, and we'll hopefully have a wonderful question and answer afterwards and get down to where we can make changes both individually and at the community level, right? So the issue is that we have to make the decisions as a community what's important. And supporting our farmers markets, supporting groups of people in our community that are trying to work with kids, trying to get kids eating healthy, trying to have gardens in the schools, those are very important. And like I said, I could stand up here for the next 20 minutes and tell you about all the wonderful things that are going on in this community. It's humbling to see how many people really want to do the right thing. So thank you for coming. We'll have a short break after we finish this. There are some refreshments after the film, and yes, it's fruits and vegetables and water out there, so there are no devil dogs, there are no Twinkies. I'm sorry. So let's hit it. Thank you. Thanks for coming.
I'm a writer. I've spent a lot of time writing articles and books tracing the food chain and showing people where their food came from, how it was produced, following meals all the way back to the farm. But I found that what I kept hearing from readers was, yeah, you told me where the food comes from and how the animals live and everything, but what I really want to know is what should I eat? Every day there's a new headline. Eat more fiber. Drink less milk. Eggs are bad. Eggs are good. As eaters, we feel whipsawed by the changes in the nutritional advice we're getting. And I became absorbed in this question. Yeah, what do we know? What do we know about the links between diet and health? That was something I hadn't really focused on very much. So I decided to see if I could come up with some guidance for myself, for my readers, for my family, on how to eat if you're concerned about your health. I really thought the answer to this question would be so much more complex than it has turned out to be. Thank you. I'm Michael Pollan. Join me as I make the case in defense of food. Scientists, nutrition educators, when I finally realized what they're really telling me is eat food, it was just like a light had gone off. It's like, could it really be that simple? And the more I thought about it, I was like, it is that simple. Eat food, not too much, mostly plants. This is what our species has done for hundreds of thousands of years. So that advice, I think, is about as universal as any advice you could offer. It's very rare in our lives where the answer to a complicated question is so simple. But when it comes to eating, it is.
So I just want to take a moment just briefly to thank all of our partners and sponsors this evening. Mattapoisett Wellness Center, Mass in Motion New Bedford, the New Bedford Whaling Museum, Hawthorne Medical Associates, South Coast Health Systems, Community Nurses and Home Care, the Carney Family Charitable Foundation, the Greater New Bedford Health Center, Bay Coast Bank, WJFD, Partners for a Healthier Community in Fall River, Carabiners and Down to Earth, the Acushnet Foundation, the Acushnet Farmers Market, the Marion Institute in Grow Education, and UMass Dartmouth Psychology Department. So I want to thank all those people for being partners for making tonight possible. I will remind you at the conclusion there are refreshments, but I think for the sake of time, we're probably going to go right directly into Dr. Ludwig's talk and discussion. Just to remind you, we do have information about upcoming events, including our weekly program, our Heart Walk with the American Heart Association in May. I'll be putting on a program with Loretta LaRoche at the end of the month in Plymouth, how to keep your heart healthy. And just join our Facebook group and on all those things. So this movie raises a lot of questions in terms of, gives a lot of answers, but does raise some more questions as to how can we change our own diet and our community's diet. And as I talked at the beginning, we have a lot of great thought leaders and people that are doing fantastic work in our community, and we just need to continue to grow that community. I'm very delighted to introduce Dr. David Ludwig. He is an endocrinologist and a researcher at Boston Children's Hospital. He's a professor of pediatrics at the Harvard Medical School and also a professor of nutrition at the Harvard School of Public Health. And he doesn't know this yet, but one of his quotes is one of my wife's favorite. So in the movie Fed Up, which he also participated in, he has a line that says, "You can eat a bowl of cornflakes with no added sugar, or you can eat a bowl of sugar with no added cornflakes, and as soon as it gets below your neck, the body treats it the same." And I think that one of the things that we learned today is it's not just a sugar problem, but it's also the issues that we have with refined grains have gotten us into trouble. And I'm very excited to have him speak tonight, and he's going to also be signing his book. There are copies of his book. They're available in the gift store, excuse me. And David Ludwig. Thank you, Dr. Ludwig.
Okay, very good. This is
That's live.
Oh, well, thank you for the introduction. I was mortified to find out that I'm keeping you from refreshments.
We're doing a little fasting.
I will be brief. Well, it's a great pleasure to be here, and congratulations on this wonderful film series. My first time to New Bedford, and I'm just delighted by what I see in the community. I can't believe I haven't been down from Boston before. So I have a 7-year-old. We're going to come back over a weekend and explore this lovely community. Just out of curiosity, are most people from New Bedford here? Everybody's from pretty much? That's wonderful. So Michael Pollan suggested that we should be eating food, and we shouldn't be overdoing the sugary beverages and all of these processed foods. So he made that argument tonight. But wait a second. What's wrong with some of these processed foods, even the sugary beverages? You know, virtually every single nutrition association and the US government has said for essentially the last 40 years that a calorie is a calorie. And that if you want to lose weight, you should eat less and move more. So what's the matter with having, even a half liter of sugary beverages a day or a big bag of chips from a factory, as long as you eat less of other things later or get a little more active? Maybe you're right, maybe they don't have quite so many vitamins and minerals, so take a vitamin pill, so have a Coke, a big one, take a vitamin pill, and for good measure, put in some Metamucil for fiber. But you're laughing, but that's exactly the paradigm that we have functioned under for the last 40 years. All calories are alike, and then there are no bad foods, and all you have to do is just eat less. If you want to enjoy the Pepsi, I won't pick on Coke all the time, just eat less later. So what's the problem? In fact, the USDA just came out with the 2015 dietary guidelines. Came out in 2016, but we won't complain too much. Came out in January, and the very first guideline says, control your calorie balance. Eat an amount of food that balances with your calorie expenditure. So how does this all make sense? I mean, it sounds so reasonable up here, but this is a pretty radical statement that flies in the face of 40 years of research. I actually happen to agree with Michael Pollan, which is why I agreed to be in the film, and this is really why I wrote this book called Always Hungry. It's got a program for people to follow at home, but the first part of the book, it looks at the science. And I'm making an argument that the calorie balance approach to weight control is profoundly misguided. And it in fact has contributed to the obesity epidemic in important ways. So what is this? I mean, yes, calorie balance makes sense if you're an inanimate object. So for a toaster oven, understanding calories going in and out makes sense. But humans are dynamic biological systems. We respond to changes in calorie intake or output, which in a way that's completely disregarded by the conventional approach. So let me backtrack just a second. Very few people, and the research is really clear on this, very few people can successfully decrease their calorie intake without changing what they're eating, can cut back on calories. Yes, they might lose weight for a short while, but can successfully keep the weight off. So this approach is really clear that it doesn't work in practice. In fact, if you like calorie balance approach to weight control, you've got to love the low-fat diet, because fat has twice the calories of the other nutrients per bite or per gram, protein and carbohydrate. This was the thinking of the first USDA food guide pyramid. Remember, all the fat was at the top, and carbs, the grain-based carbs, were at the base. We're supposed to eat 6 to 11 servings of those things a day. Rice and bread and potatoes actually was another category, so you could even get more if you included those. And we now know, my group was a co-author on a study that just published this, and other groups have done this as well, other teams, that when you fairly look at low-fat diets stacked up against virtually every other kind of diet, the low-fat diet comes in last for weight loss. So it would seem to make sense that if you don't want fat on your body, don't put fat into your body. But that recommendation, when it was first made, the low-fat diet in the 70s and 80s, never had an evidence base, and we now know that it was completely wrong. So first of all, the first problem with the calorie balance model is nobody can do it. Really, I mean, the evidence is less than 10% can keep off of, less than 10% of the public can keep off just 10% of their body weight for 1 year, people who are overweight or have obesity. So it doesn't work. The second problem with this approach is it blames people for that failure, right? If it's so simple, just eat less, move more, anybody should be able to do it, and if you can't do it, there must be something the matter with you. You at least have poor willpower, poor discipline. Maybe you have a character issue. And you know, we chuckle, but this is probably underlies why people with weight issues in this society suffer a level of stigmatization, prejudice, bias, discrimination, sometimes with tragic consequences, especially in children, in a way that we would never tolerate for any other medical condition. We seem to have this cultural notion that we should be able to control our weight, that anybody who can't, it's their fault. They don't deserve any sympathy. It's really, they just need to buck up and show some discipline. And these attitudes, again, underlie cultural prejudice that we have about this medical condition that we don't have about any other. So that's the second big problem with the calorie balance model. The third problem is that nobody can actually do it, not even a nutrition expert, not even somebody, I couldn't do it, and I studied nutrition my whole life. Without elaborate technology, there's no way that somebody can come within 350 calories a day of accurately estimating their calorie balance. It's just, there's too much variation in foods, in physical activity, in our metabolic rate. If you were off by 350 calories a day in the same direction, you could go from lean to massively obese in 4 or 5 years. So we can't do it. So it doesn't work. We get blamed for that failure. It actually can't work. And the ultimate irony is that if calorie balance were so important to weight control, how did humans ever manage to avoid massive swings in body weight before the very notion of the calorie was invented 100 years ago? You know, like people in 17th century France or 18th century Italy or Japan, you know, there were pockets of starvation, but people weren't living hand to mouth all the time. There was plenty of food for most people for much of human history. And yet people seem to manage to know when to stop. Their bodies would regulate their own weight naturally under normal circumstances. Something has changed in the last 40 years where year after year, as a population, we get heavier and heavier. So what's going on? Well, what I implied earlier is the calorie balance model neglects a basic scientific fact we've known essentially for a century, which is body weight is more under biological control than willpower. In the short term, yes, you can eat less and lose weight, but if you start eating less, the body fights back. What happens? Well, we know predictably what happens when people start eating less. They lose weight and their hunger goes up. Now, hunger is not a fleeting feeling. It's a primal biological signal that your body needs fuel, and very difficult to ignore. If you try to, your body will fight back with even stronger weapons, which is you'll go into starvation biology. Your metabolism will start to slow down. So rising hunger and slowing calorie burn is a battle between mind and metabolism that almost nobody can win. So we need a different paradigm. And I and others, other groups, other researchers have been beginning to address this new paradigm, which is that overeating actually doesn't make you fat. Not over the long term. Yes, you can gain a few pounds, but your body will fight back in the other direction. In the overfeeding studies that have been done in research settings, you take volunteers and you force feed them, with their permission. And they usually get nice stipends for this. You force feed them hundreds or 1,000 calories extra a day. And yes, they'll gain weight for a while. But their body fights back in the other direction. They lose all interest in food. Their metabolism speeds up in the body's attempt to get rid of these extra calories. They feel as miserable as people in the starvation studies. Once the protocol ends, they eat a lot less until their weight comes right back down to where it started. So we've got this sort of body weight set point. So what is causing this set point to rise year after year? Well, it started right about the time we launched the low-fat diet. We cut back on fat, thinking that it was bad for the heart, and that is being totally revised as well. We can come back to that, but we cut back on fat. Our diet, the food industry replaced those calories with sugar and with starch. The ultimate version of that was the fat-free snack bars, or the low-fat Twinkie. Now, these were actually advertised as health foods. The food industry loved it because sugar and starch is actually cheaper than the fat that they were putting in. And they called it a health food. They sold it at a premium price. We, of course, gobbled it up. But these highly processed carbohydrates are, what they do is they raise levels of the hormone insulin higher than any other food, calorie for calorie. And we all heard of insulin. I call insulin the miracle grow for your fat cells. Just not the kind of miracle you want to have happen in your body. This is endocrinology 101. When a child with type 1 diabetes first comes to attention without enough insulin in their body, they can't make enough because of this developing disease, they will have invariably lost weight. Give them the right amount of insulin, and their weight comes back to its normal trajectory. Give them too much insulin, and they'll predictably gain weight. You can dial up or down a research animal's body weight just by changing the amount of insulin. If you don't have diabetes, the fastest way to change the amount of insulin you make is changing the amount of processed carbohydrates you eat. Cut back on the refined grains, potato products, concentrated sugars, your insulin levels drop, and then the fat cells in the body calm down. My basic premise here is that obesity isn't caused by overeating. It's caused by too much of the hormone insulin that's driving our fat cells into a feeding frenzy. So they feast, the body starves, you just cut back on calories, you make that situation worse. But if you change what you're eating, now this was implied throughout the movie, the focus on food quality, getting away from the highly processed foods, which are predominantly processed carbohydrates. The food takes longer to digest, insulin levels calm down. Those fat cells, which have been driven by insulin to eat, calm down. They open up, some of those pent-up calories flood back in the body. The brain says, wow, this feels good. It has a better access to calories it needs, the calories the rest of the body needs. Hunger decreases, cravings decrease, metabolism speeds up, and you begin to lose weight with your body's cooperation, not with your body kicking and screaming. So that's the concept behind this approach, and it's consistent with really a number of other diets that have been offered through the years. A more extreme version might be like the Atkins type diet, where they try to get rid of carbohydrates entirely. But I think that approach isn't necessary. When you get the science right, you get maximum amount of benefit with a minimum amount of deprivation. And you don't have to get rid of all carbohydrates to get this benefit. You've got to focus on getting rid of the processed stuff, increasing fat. We use a whole range of delicious fats at the end of the movie. I just got the last part. But you know, the French, they're not thin despite those delicious fats they're eating. They're thinner because of those delicious fats they're eating. Those fats are highly satiating. They displace the processed carbs so you don't miss them. You get much more enjoyment from food. And your hormones and your blood sugar remain much more stable, giving your metabolism a big boost. Let me just briefly tell you about two studies. One is called Look Ahead. This was a low-fat diet done in the United States with people who have type 2 diabetes to try to prevent heart disease. That's one of the big concerns in type 2 diabetes. This was a US study. They were thinking they almost didn't have to do it. Of course a low-fat diet would be beneficial. And the study was actually pretty biased. It wasn't a fair design. The low-fat group got lots of personal and group attention. They got advice to eat fruits and vegetables and a whole bunch of other supports. The control group just got written educational materials. And they had to end the study early because the low-fat diet showed no benefit for heart disease. among these patients with type 2 diabetes. In fact, an early analysis said that there was not even the promise of a benefit no matter how long they would have continued the study. So it was closed for futility. At about the same time that that study was published, a second study was published from Spain called Predinet. And that was not a low-fat diet, it was a high-fat diet. They gave people, well, the control group got a low-fat diet by comparison, and the other groups got high-fat foods, either lots of nuts or olive oil. The olive oil group got a liter of olive oil a week. That's a huge amount of high-fat calories. They also had to end the study early, but in this case, because the effect was basically a blowout response. Those higher fat groups showed such rapid declines in cardiovascular disease that they didn't have to keep the study going. And in fact, it would have been unethical to keep the low-fat group eating that low-fat diet. So, you know, it's like Woody Allen in this movie, Sleeper. You know, he wakes up and he discovers almost presciently that, like, he says, what? I mean, chocolate's a health food? Yes. All of these foods that we've been told to keep off our plate, nuts, olive oil, full-fat dairy products, avocado, real dark chocolate. These look great in the long-term studies. They are related to less weight gain than other foods, than many other foods, and protection against diabetes and heart disease. The top of the list for risk is the processed carbohydrates, added sugars, potato products, and refined grain products. So I think this is a message that's completely consistent with what you've heard in this movie. Quality matters. In fact, I would take it a step further than Michael. You know, he says, eat food, not too much. I think if we put the focus on quality, quantity takes care of itself. We have a part of our brain called the hypothalamus that's evolved over millions of years to control our body weight. It does it automatically. If we eat a little too much, we'll be a little less hungry the next day, and our metabolism will speed up to get rid of those calories. If we eat a little too few calories, we adjust the next day. This happens automatically. It's like the way our breathing, you can hold your breath, and then your body will compensate. You'll breathe a little faster, you'll blow off the CO2, and you'll readjust back to your normal level. That's what happens with body weight if we're eating the right foods. Modern industrial processed carbohydrates confuse this beautiful body weight regulating system and make for this battle between mind and metabolism few of us can win. But if we put the full focus on quality, calories, it's not that they're non-scientific. They're a useful scientific concept. It's just not something that we need to worry about because the body will always do a better job, given half a chance, of controlling our weight than our conscious brain. So anyway, that's the science that I go through and the program in the second part of the book. It's 3 phases. The first phase is actually a really high-fat diet, 50% fat. That fat helps you get rid of the processed carbs that we've all got used to eating without craving them. That's 2 weeks, and then we segue into a phase 2 where you get to add back whole kernel grains, the traditional grains that our grandparents used to eat, depending upon where you come from in the world. Steel cut or old-fashioned oatmeal instead of instant oats, wheat berries instead of white bread, quinoa, and we stay in phase 2 until body weight comes down to its new set point. And then phase 3 lets us add back a little bit, and I agree, that with Michael, that we get to throw out the rules once in a while. Some people, especially after cleaning up their diet and improving their metabolism for a while, can handle a little bit more processed carbs. Then you experiment with them. If you can, great, enjoy them. For other people, any amount of that's going to trigger cycles of food cravings, overeating, and weight gain, and for them, it's just not going to be worth it. So I wrote the book to take on this paradigm of calorie in, calorie out, which I think has been terribly misguided and caused a lot of shame and suffering among the public. I think that just as we want to restore, Michael talked about returning to culture until science can actually figure out the answers. Science is beginning to figure out answers. And one answer is that this calorie balance model is wrong. It's not helpful. And we need a new approach. And, but I want to emphasize that this isn't work that's just come out of my laboratory. Laboratories around the world and dating back decades have been questioning the calorie balance model approach to weight control. And I think we're reaching a tipping point. Even Weight Watchers, which is the ultimate calorie balance, a year ago they said you could eat fruit for free, no points. I mean, that's in complete defiance of calorie balance, right? If all the calories count, why should fruit calories not count? So we're reaching a tipping point where we're recognizing that food is more than the numbers that you can put on a package. That food is information. When we eat the right foods, we change our hormones, our metabolism, even the expression of genes in our body in ways that can move us toward health or to disease. And we have the power to make that choice. Fortunately, when we do make that choice, if we start making that choice in large enough numbers, the food industry will stop marketing as much junk and start providing some of the more good stuff. I think I'll, in the interest of time and understanding that there's a break with hopefully very good foods outside, I'll bring this to a close, but open to a few questions.
Yeah, let's open it up to some questions. Raise your hand, I'll come down.
I hope this is the last book I had to buy about nutrition. I hope this is the last book I had to buy about nutrition.
I hope it's the second to the last book, and then you'll buy one more copy for a friend.
I have a question with the focus on eating fresh vegetables and particularly fruit with all the GMOs. I mean, where do you stand with all that in terms of getting?
So you're saying fresh versus frozen and GMO versus not? Yeah, we could probably have another movie and then another talk about those things. We all have to make value judgments based on where we are along the path of healing. So I run the Optimal Weight for Life clinic at Boston Children's. In fact, Tuesday mornings is my clinic day. So I saw patients this morning, and I see kids who never eat any kinds of fruits or vegetables. Their diet is just one industrial product after another. It's just horrifying. And so for them, frozen, if they would be willing, and also, unfortunately, in part due to farm policy and regulations and financial decisions in Washington, as influenced by food industry lobbying, we have a food environment that makes industrial processed foods cheap and whole foods very expensive. And so if a family can't afford fresh food, fresh fruits or vegetables, they can't get it in their inner city, the kid walks home and all he passes is a convenience store, I'm happy that first step might just be frozen vegetables. But I think as we naturally begin this movement, as our taste buds come off of these industrialized hyper-sweetened foods and the other adulterants, we begin to appreciate these foods in ways that we might not have, and then actually start craving more and more healthy things. I think that's a natural process that that needs encouragement, but it's a natural evolutionary process that people make. And that first step might be a GMO vegetable, but that's probably going to be better than what they're eating now. And but ultimately, we want to have a food supply where we can buy the freshest, most natural foods that are convenient. And I had a proposal with Dari Mosafarian, who's the dean at Tufts Friedman School of Public Health. We proposed a tax, a small tax on all processed foods, not just sugary beverages, all processed foods. Now, because there's so much processed foods around, we could then use that money to subsidize whole foods. And since there's so much less of that being eaten, a small tax would result in a massive subsidy, making fruits and vegetables virtually free and creating a huge incentive for farmers to make them. We don't have enough land in agriculture, in cultivation, for everybody to have 5 fruits and vegetables today. If we all started following that, we'd run out of fruits and vegetables in the United States. So obviously this is a big issue that relates to food policy, agriculture, politics, and the like. But we have to start somewhere, and wherever we are, let's just take that next step.
Just comment if you can, if you would. You go to the local supermarket and not the farmer's market here in New England. A lot of the food's coming in from, Argentina, Chile, South America, places where they don't have the same kinds of laws about pesticides and things as we do. You can wash them, but any studies, any information or knowledge about that? If you want to tell us, it does, just a completely different question if you want to comment on it.
Yeah.
How we're modifying sugars and salts out of their natural states.
Yeah.
We don't even know.
Yeah. Absolutely. There are, we expose ourselves to thousands of chemicals that have never before been in the environment, some through food, some put there intentionally, like food additives, some that are residues of intentional adding, like pesticides. Others, they're there just because we're putting our food in plastic. How much food is coming, even fruits and vegetables are coming in plastic, or cans that have plasticizers to hold them together, and industrial wastes that wind up in the water or the food, air pollution. Of course, I'm a bit of a hypochondriac. I could spend my, an endocrinologist, and I know that many of these substances are endocrine disruptors. There's no question that, in my mind, that we are exposing ourselves to risk due to decades of very short-sighted policies around chemicals and additives, better living through chemistry. But that said, I think the relative risks are in a different league than for processed foods. When kids are getting dozens, if not hundreds of grams a day of sugar and additional highly adulterated foods, their bodies are being flooded by these very cheap calories. They're deficient of the real nutrients that the body needs for health. That increases risk hundreds of times, in my view, greater than the residue on pesticides. So, I think, and again, do we try to get organic food as much as possible? Absolutely. Although, if we see a tired head of lettuce that came in from California organic, or a local lettuce that might not have been organic, but raised by a pretty credible farmer, I'm going with the second. So I think we have to all just make our way through this confusing food environment, fight for better labeling laws, fight for, ultimately, food policies that give farmers, like small family farmers that want to do it right, a fighting chance against the big corporations.
On that same line, I'd be the link, can you see a link between all the automobiles?
Put your, no, you got it. Yeah, right. Just talking to me.
Between all the autoimmune diseases that we have going on, the lupus, the rheumatoid, the vasculitis, the scleroderma. I know there's no foundation for finding what the causes are. But do you see a link between that?
There's got to be. Why? Every third person has an autoimmune disease these days. Where is that coming from? Typically there isn't going to be a one-to-one link. Like, I'm eating too much sugar and I have an autoimmune disease. These can have multiple contributors, including family risk. But do these foods, especially the processed carbohydrates, set up an environment of inflammation in the body? Absolutely. In fact, the two key biological targets of the approach that we use, one is, as I mentioned, to lower insulin levels. And the other key part is to calm chronic inflammation. We call these the twin metabolic troublemakers. They go together. When insulin levels rise too high, the fat cells start sucking up all of these calories. They reach a state where they go from hungry fat to what we call angry fat. They start to get inflamed. White blood cells rush in. And the fat tissue, which was once health supporting, becomes toxic, spewing out these immunologically active chemicals that might be useful if you're trying to fight an acute infection. But if there's no infection and it continues, it causes chronic inflammation. Chronic inflammation is the basis of so many diseases, not just the autoimmune diseases, but atherosclerosis, that's inflammation in the lining of the blood vessels feeding the big organs. Chronic inflammation in the liver causes metabolic problems. In the brain, it affects the satiety center and leads to this vicious cycle of weight gain. So, absolutely. Yeah, but I think the most inflammatory things that we're eating today, well, trans fats are really bad. But after that, it's the processed carbs. When we eat them, you can measure literally in the moments after you eat them, as blood sugar surges, a burst of chronic inflammation that happens in the body. So maybe one more question, and then we can.
One mention about plastic bottles and water bottles. Is water safe to drink with fluoride in it? Isn't that a poison?
Yeah. Well, it's the dose makes the poison there. I mean, and of course, there's a lot of strong feelings about this, and some people speak in terms of just personal choice. They don't want to have fluoride added to their water supply and be obliged to consume it. From a public health perspective, and as a pediatrician, the data are pretty clear that it, in very small amounts, has a tremendous benefit in reducing dental cavities, which we might take for granted today because dental health is so much improved. But was a huge problem, and in fact, humans living in nature, one of the main reasons we would wind up dying at some point if an infection didn't get us is we'd lose our teeth and would be unable to eat at some point. So that's a huge public benefit for children, a little bit of fluoride. Too much of it is clearly bad, and if you have personal concerns about it and just don't want to drink bottled water, there clearly are water filtration systems you can put into your home that would remove the fluoride, reverse osmosis systems like that.
Was the science behind it false science?
Well, I think the science relating dental.
No, on the fluoride itself still being used for rat poisoning.
Yeah, well, too much of it is clearly a very bad thing. Absolutely. I mean, there's fluoride naturally in many waters, and that's how this was first discovered, that they saw people living in areas where there was more fluoride had fewer dental cavities. But clearly we don't want to overdo it. Anyway, thank you very much. Happy to take your questions outside. Well, it's such a bread, it comes off this way, so I need to get up with it.